Welcome to the Introduction to Programming series for Silicon Dojo. In this series, you're going to learn the basics of what is required in order to create your own programs. So actually, in my particular timeline, this is either the fourth or the fifth self-study course that I've created for Silicon Dojo. I actually created a 48-part Introduction to Python series initially. Then we have a Bottle Web App framework series. Then we have a SQL, a structured query language series. And then I did half a series on something called Moondream AI, which became obsolete halfway through me finishing the series. So that's why I say I've already done between 3 to 4 of the series. And now it might seem a little weird that I'm doing the Introduction to Programming series now after we've actually done a number of series on programming languages. Well, one of the things that I realized, especially for the new students, is that although I was teaching the syntax and although I was teaching the skills that were required to use specific languages, the students really didn't understand where programming fit into the overall world of technology, and also the basic concepts for planning and designing programs, right? So I showed people how to use HTML forms. With those HTML forms, send information back to a Python, a backend script. In that Python script, then take that information and dump it into a database. But I hadn't actually taught anybody how to do things such as wireframes. So what a wireframe is literally where you draw out what the application is supposed to look like. So literally on a piece of paper, if you want to, you draw out what the application is supposed to look like and what the workflow should be, what the flow of the program should be. And then once you have that, you can just sit down at your computer and you can type out the code to create a code version of what you drew. And I realized I hadn't taught my students wireframing. I hadn't taught my students pseudocode. I hadn't really taught my students what frameworks were and all of these other components with programming in general. And so that's why we're doing this series. So this series is going to go over the large concepts that will allow you to take your idea from your brain and actually be able to turn it into an overall program. The important thing to understand though is we're not going to deal a lot with syntax. So I'll show you some stuff in Python and CSS and HTML and JavaScript and SQL and all that kind of thing, but that's not really what this series is about. What this series is more about is getting you to think about what programming actually is and give you the skill sets on how to program. So basically you can sit down, you can figure out what your application should look like, you can then figure out what programming languages you need in order to be able to build that particular application, and then go from there to go through all of the processes to actually be able to build out that app. So we'll go over what a back-end programming language is. We're not going to go over a lot of specific syntax for PHP or Python or that type of thing. We'll go over what native apps are, what porting and all that kind of stuff is. We're not going to get a lot into the actual coding and doing any of that. So mainly what this skill series is going to be is it's more going to be like an academic series to give you an idea of what you're going to be doing with the Python and the Bottle Web App and the SQL and the other series we have is important. So you go in and you're like, oh, I know why we use Python. I know why we use JavaScript. I know why we use Python in this situation and JavaScript in a different situation. Oh, again, we're going to talk about things like tech stacks. Okay, this is the legacy tech stack of my organization, and because we have this tech stack already, the most appropriate language is going to be whatever the language is, right? So that's what we're trying to do with this particular series, is give you the idea of what programming is so that when you actually sit down to write code, you have a better grasp of what you're actually trying to accomplish.